Hello and welcome everyone to our top 10 board games of all time. You've hopefully been sticking through our entire list with us. Maybe you just jumped here because you're curious what our top 10 are. Both are acceptable. We are so excited to do this video. We've been waiting to do this for a long time. Yeah. I was even super excited just to try to figure out what my top 10 were and in what order. It was quite the challenge. We have poured ourselves some champagne here because this is also our last video of 2021, which is an up and down year in the world, obviously, but in terms of just even our YouTube channel has been such an exciting, humbling year to see all the stuff that's happened, and what better way to kick that off than us talking about our top 10 board games of all time. Yeah. Sure, we're gonna have some nice debate in the comments and people chime in with their thoughts as well. But I did want to say cheers before we start to a 2021 full of a lot of board game content that we've created. And I know you wanted to make a little prediction on how many games you think we're gonna have crossed over in the top 10, because so far I think people will be surprised at how different our lists have been considering we run the channel together. Like there's a lot of different board game opinions going on here, right?
I was expecting, even before we each put together our top 50, because we do like at least half of the gaming we do, I would say, is with each other probably. I expected there to be a lot more overlap. There's been a decent amount from 50 to 11 or whatever, but I'm honestly only expecting a single overlap. There's one for sure guaranteed, no question. Yes. I would be very surprised if there's any more than one.
I think it's one as well. And at first I thought it was gonna be 2 or 3 when I first looked at it, but they've shown up in other spots already. So I think it's just gonna be one, and we're probably thinking of the exact same game.
I think we both know which one it is. There's no way, if you left this off, I would walk out of here. Like, there's no way this isn't on your list. So
okay, without further ado, let's jump right into it. My number 10 game, and that is Azul. So Azul is a game that I knew was going to be on the list. I knew it was going to be high, but I was even surprised myself that it snuck into my top 10. But what really did it was I just played it recently again. And I played this game at least 20, 30 times. And I just played it again recently, and it was with someone who I had introduced to for the very first time. And it reminded me just how much I love the simplistic strategy of it, but how deep it actually is, and how beautiful it is, but also it can be pretty cutthroat. And the decisions you're making with, taking these tiles are going to push these to the middle, and that person needs 2 of this color, and now you've pushed them with 3 in the middle, so now there's 5 together, and it screws up their plans. Even elements like that, and when to go take tiles in the middle and have to take negative points, and how you're going to force negative points on your opponent that way, it can be pretty cutthroat. And you're also making interesting decisions on, when am I going to build on the rows. If I can't complete a row now, am I going to build on it now and keep that locked into that color for the next round because I really want to achieve that color on that row? There's so many fun decisions, and it plays quick, it's accessible, and I have so much fun every single time I play that it was that playing it again recently that made me really remember and say, you know what, I debated for a long time, do I like this new version, the stained glass Jacinto more? And it took going back to this to realize, no, you know what? It's going to be really hard to topple the memories I have with the original Azul, and just how, well crafted I actually think that game is. Yeah. So yeah, it slides into my top 10, just fits in there. It's hard to say whether that'll stick around. If there's a new version of Azul coming out next year, if it'll eventually be surpassed, but I'm really, really happy with where it ended up, and it's a game I'm definitely never going to get rid of and always go back to.
Nice. Yeah, I think this was number 47 or 48 from your swing. So I won't say much because it's much lower on the list, but I do want to ask you, what's your favorite player count for this?
You know what? I've enjoyed it a lot when we've played with 4, but I honestly think I've had the most fun when I played with 2. Yeah,
I agree. Honestly, it's the most interaction, right?
Yeah, and it plays quicker. It just feels like it's easier to teach. That everything about the 2. I like 2-player games a lot as it is, but I just feel like that's my favorite one to play it with. I could probably say it's close to 3 as well, but 2,
the least amount of downtime, and if someone else is familiar with it, you can play it in like 30 minutes, sometimes maybe even less once you're familiar with it.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, great game.
Yeah.
All right, my number 10 is a game that you had, I think it was in your 20 to 30 range. That is The Crew, The Quest for Planet 9. Wow. So I have not yet tried Mission Deep Sea, which by all accounts sounds like just a slightly more refined, slightly better version. We'll see. And I think this is only the second cooperative game in my entire top 50. In my opinion, it's my favorite cooperative game, my favorite trick-taking game, my favorite limited communication game. I don't even gravitate, it's the only cooperative game I can think of that I'm ever going to suggest playing. Maybe Ghost Stories because I don't own it, so when I come over to your place, I would really like to try Ghost Stories more often, but otherwise, I always prefer to play competitive games, except if The Crew is an option, and there's something about this game that I hesitated on whether or not to include it this high because we've played 25 of the 50 missions in the first version, but we've only played it on, I think, 3 separate occasions, but every time I thought about not having it in my top 10, I just kept thinking back to how I felt about it the first time we played it, how much fun we've had, and how it kind of ends up dominating that game night, whether we played on Board Game Arena or we've played the physical version. We thought we were going to play something else, and instead we just kept playing the crew. And it's those moments of brilliance where you feel like you send the perfect message with your communication token on your card, that someone looks at you and they kind of just go, I see what you're doing there. And at the end of the round, when you win the mission or whatever, someone's like, it was that move that you did this. And there's that kind of like, you either, like the highs are high and the lows are low, because you either celebrate together and cheer around the table at the end when you win, or you lose and you laugh about it, and someone usually owns up to like, oh, I messed that up when I did this, or like, why did you do that? You sent me the wrong message, or why didn't you play your communication token earlier? I just love the way it like really brings people together in that kind of like collaborative way, but without the, with that barrier of like no communication or that single kind of signal that you can send. It feels surprisingly thematic, even though it is just cards with numbers and really little things, but like it does kind of feel like you're in space and you have this limited, like I can just send someone a little signal and whatever. And I don't know, it's for me, part of what cracks the top 10, or the reason it cracks the top 10 is just like what it does with so few components, and like it's such a brilliant achievement in game design, in my opinion, that I will now forever be like eager to play anything that Thomas Singh designs, just because of how much I was like, man, that's a lot of game in a small box. And I just think it's a brilliant game. It's so much fun to play.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm pleasantly surprised that it's this high on your list. I knew you liked it. I didn't know how much you liked it. But yeah, it's brilliant. I'm excited for you to play Mission Deep Sea, because I think over time it's possible that it replaces the original for us both. But that being said, it's just, yeah, phenomenal in its design, and in such a small box and such an affordable box is what is so important, because having, games that rank high on people's lists that are, ranked as some of the best games of all time, be that accessible and that affordable is so good for the hobby, for someone to get into and say, hey, I can get one of the best games of all time and it's under $20, instead of having to go pay, over $100 for a giant box, right? And think that's how you have to break into the hobby. So yeah, great game. I'm so glad it's on your list.
Thanks. And yeah, honestly, it could be lower in the future, but I haven't had any plays fall flat on it yet. And I know some people, that's the issue, is they introduced it to someone who didn't really take to it or whatever, but it's always been just an absolute hit.
Nice. My number 9 is a game you've talked about in the last video, and that is Santorini. I love this game. It surprised me at first that it was this high, but again, I played it recently again. I played this game so many times, because again, we'll sit down and play like 7 games in one sitting. Every memory I've had with this game has been amazing. I've introduced it to friends and partners and my dad and everything, and it's a different player counts, but again, mostly 2. The god powers for me make it. I feel like, you had a video recently that you talked about chess, and chess is a game I never really got into, because I'm not that into like the competitive nature of like the really pure abstract games in that way, in the way the chess is. And Santorini, adding in the god powers and having it be this really fun game where every single game is a bit of a puzzle, and how do I overcome this person's god power with mine? Yes, there's matchups that it's going to seem impossible, but even in those matchups are some of the ones where it's the most memorable victories that I've had. I had one where the one I played up against recently, where the person had whatever god it is, where when you're on the outer side of the board, you can move as many times as you want. So you could move all the way around the board, and then you can just pop back into the center. And the power I had was so inconsequential, I barely even used it that game, because I could not figure out how to incorporate it. And I ended up winning because I just found a way to use that person's power against them and trap one of their characters. So anything is possible in terms of overcoming the powers, but there's so many to explore and so many combinations that I still haven't played all the gods. You got me the expansions, so there's even more released there. Yeah, it is such a phenomenal game. I have so much fun with this. Honestly, I would never host a game night with one other person and have them say, do you want to just play Santorini, and be disappointed. I'd say, absolutely, let's bring it out, have some drinks, play like a best of 7 of Santorini. We've done that at the cabin before. We'll likely do it again. I think every time we go to the cabin, one of us will bring Santorini at this point, because it's an easy one.
Well, bring your copy, because I don't have the expansion.
Right. It's it's a phenomenal game. If you haven't played it, I highly recommend it. Pretty much get any version, even though they're all thematically different, the essence is still there. I really, really don't see this game leaving my collection anytime soon.
Yeah, and it's on Board Game Arena to try for free. Obviously, the production and seeing people like jump up the levels is a really nice table presence, but if you're hesitant or can't find it, definitely try it on Board Game Arena.
Yeah,
it is an amazing game. All right, number 9 on my list is another fairly new game following up the crew, and that is Renature. So this one, I know
That's you might high be on your list.
I know, but It was one of those ones too where the very first time we played it, you and I, just as it's a 2 to 4 player game. I've done a review on how to play video on the channel. But the first time we played it with 2 players, I think we both sat there thinking like, this game is brilliant. Like, we absolutely loved it. And then I had to I always have to consider afterwards, did I have fun with that game, or did I have such a high opinion of it because of that one experience, or is the game going to hold up after multiple plays? Yeah. And since then, I've played it at all player counts. I've played it probably 6 or 7 times total. And every time I've played it, I've absolutely loved it. There's never been a time where it was just a kind of an okay game. I would say the one slight knock I would have on it, or the reason why it's maybe not higher on the list, is because the first few turns of the game aren't particularly interesting. Because it has this kind of cascading thing where you start at the top of the board and you build down, and as you get further and further down and you're building off of each other's dominoes and placing those bushes and trees and whatever, you get to these bigger, more lucrative point spots, right? So early on, sometimes the first 2-3 turns can just feel like you don't really know what you should be doing or where you should be going. You just kind of place a domino, see what happens. You might score a point, but it's that building tension and how the game ramps up, and it's a game of patience, and when are you going to place those really valuable, size 3 and size 4 trees, whether it's the ones in your own color or in the neutral color, to offset the majority in an area and deny your opponent points. And it's the room for these clever plays with those neutral tiles or pieces, as well as the clouds. You have this limited supply of those 6 cloud tokens that allow you to do a bunch of different things, whether it's take another turn or change the wild suit. And it's there's always 1 or 2 or maybe 3 plays every game where everyone at the table just goes, oh, that was awesome. Yeah. And there was one game that you and I played, you might remember it. I think it was a 3-player game we played where I used a bunch of my clouds maybe around the midpoint of the game, thinking that I was doing this brilliant move, and I remember you're like, oh, that was really nice, whatever, and I was sitting there like, yeah, that's right. And then 2 or 3 turns later, you did something else that just made my jaw drop, and I remember I just thought right away, if you win the game, it's because of that move, and you won. And I remember I love games that have the room for these brilliant, clever plays. We talked about it with Kingdom Builder in the last video, and this has it more than most games I've played, where sometimes you just have to sit and puzzle it out and figure out when are you going to use those cloud tokens, when are you going to pull that brilliant play out that could win you the game. Anyways, it works well at all player counts, probably best at 3 so far, but still really good at 2 and 4. One that I expect to be playing for many, many years.
Yeah, I honestly can't add anything more compared to what you said and what I said before. I love it. It will likely rise over the years the more I play it. I just haven't played as much as you have.
Right.
But it's on my list for a reason, and I was surprised it's this high, but when the more I think about it and the times we did play in those moments, I'm not actually that surprised.
Fair enough. And it was in the 30s for you or something like that, right? Or
yeah, 20s? Something like that. Yeah.
Fairly high
still pretty high on games of all time.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. My number 8 game of all time is Lost Cities. So this is a 2-player game that Carlo already talked about. I have played this game so many times because of Board Game Arena, but even the physical copy before that I had played already probably 30 times. I absolutely adore this game. It is the game that frustrates me the most while also being enjoyable, because you're constantly not wanting to take your turn, which you think that sounds weird, but it's the fact that you want to keep everything, but you can't, and you also want cards, but you're like, what am I going to give up instead of that? What am I going to give up and my opponent's going to end up needing it? I'm holding on to this handshake card because I don't need it, but I know that they haven't played yet, and if I put it down, they're going to take it, and that might be the turning point of the game. So those decisions make it so that every time I'm playing this, I'm agonizing in the best way possible. And I've played this game so many times in Board Game Arena to the point, like Carlo had mentioned, that I'd push myself to second overall on the rankings of everyone in Board Game Arena because of how many I was playing. So that got me really getting into the strategy even more with Lost Cities than I ever had been. It's a 2-player game that I will never get rid of, I don't think, unless there's a new version or unless something else comes and fills that niche for me, because it's just so simple. It's just a deck of cards. You put out one board. I mean, you have to do a lot of shuffling, but you're just, even to explain it, you just, play to the color in front of you, and someone who obviously is playing for the first time isn't going to quite understand the strategy and get into the really real meat of it the first time, but really you're just playing in ascending order to your color. So for introducing that game, a lot of people I've had to say, oh, that seems pretty simple. That doesn't even seem like that much of a game. And it's really all of a sudden, as soon as you are like, I don't want to get rid of anything in my hand, then it clicks for them and they realize oh my God, this game is challenging. You have to have that moment of realization. But yeah, great game. I absolutely love it. And if you haven't tried it, try it on Board Game Arena. It's a great way to experience it. You don't have to do any of the shuffling, and it might just be for you.
Nice. Yeah, I said plenty about this. I think it was number 31 or 32 on my list. But I do have to ask you, do you feel as strongly as I do about the 3-round structure of the game being way better than the single round that you do when you play ranked?
So I much prefer playing Lost Cities with 3 rounds, but on the ranked system of BGA it only plays 1, and so I got used to playing that way as well, and it just made every turn more agonizing because I would have to really think, what are the chances that this is going to cost me the game, or what do I need to do at this point to make up these points of this game? So it was a different way to approach Lost City. It's helped me in the 3-player games to have stronger games sometimes when I think like I can push the limits a little bit.
Being better at each individual round.
Yeah. But playing 3 games offsets the luck factor of having really bad draws, and I feel like that makes it so that you end up having a more enjoyable experience. So,
cool. Yeah. Right on. Mm-hmm. All right, number 8 on my list is another game from the same year as Renature and The Crew. This is the newest game probably, or the highest ranked relatively new game in my top 10. That is Babylonia.
Oh, right.
It's listed on BGG as 2019, but it only got to us in North America in 2020. Yeah. This is an amazing game that I have only played, I think, 4 times. Probably the game I've played, definitely the game I've played the least for anything in my top 10 here. But also one of those games like Renature where the first time we played it as a 2-player game, I remember we played Hallertau and Babylonia in the same night, and we just sat there being like, damn, that was a good night of new games to try for the first time. And since then, I've been able to revisit Babylonia a couple times with 3 players. One time we played back-to-back games with 3 players because both other players requested that we played again. I haven't played it with 4 yet, which I think would probably be the best player count because you use the full board, whereas with 3 or 2 players, you only use portions of the board. It's kind of in some ways similar to Blue Lagoon, which we mentioned earlier in our lists, but not quite, because in Blue Lagoon I mentioned you only place 1 token every turn, and you're going around, and there's different scoring conditions. Like it's not really that similar. But one of the things I love most about Babylonia is the fact that you have basically your little rack of 5 tokens, and if you can either place any 2 of your nobles, of which there's 3 different types, or you can place 3 or more farmers, right? So it's that idea of you can never really know what your opponents are going to do because you don't know if someone's just going to be able to place 2 tiles on the turn or if they're going to place 3 or 4 or 5 if they have a big group of farmers. So you can't just be like, well, if I go here, then they'll place this many here or whatever. You have no idea, and it's also less restrictive than Blue Lagoon because you're not just building out from the spots where you've initially placed tiles or putting water down or putting a guy in water or a hut and then building out from there. You can go anywhere you want in Babylonia. From the very first turn, you can go 1 here, 1 over there. So the decision space in terms of where you can go and what you want to do is so wide open, and it gives this room for these turns where you pull something off that no one saw coming, and there's always the different, even the way you score things, like the ziggurats is like, if you get the majority, you can get a power for it, but if you spread out and get different ziggurats, then each time you place on a ziggurat, it's more points. Okay, what about the cities? Well, if you get the majority, you're going to gain the city tile, which is going to exponentially get you more points for more cities throughout the game, but then you're probably not going to get as big of a group of connected pieces that's going to score for the city if you actually close it off early, right? So, and then there's the crop fields. There's all kinds of cool stuff. There's the powers that you can get from the ziggurats. It's such an amazing game. It's very interactive. Sometimes you just take a turn to block someone because you have to think, do I want to go somewhere that's going to get me points, or is it more important to stop this person from connecting this huge chain that they're going to maybe be able to score for multiple times throughout the game? It's a game that I really want to play a lot more. It's one of my favorite Reiner Knizia games of all time, and obviously just one of my favorite games of all time in general. It's fairly new to me, but it's one that I know I'm going to be playing for many years. I don't know if I'll ever give it to my copy. It would take a really good, similar feeling tile-laying game to make me ever consider getting rid of this.
Right. I will admit, I knew this was going to be in your top 50, but I thought you liked Blue Lagoon more than Babylonia, and I guess I'd never asked you that direct question, so I was just making that assumption based on enthusiasm when you played or something. I don't know. But then when I saw it on your list of the top game of 2020, that's when I realized like how much you liked it.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, this is going to be high up on his list. So yeah, I'm not surprised in the top 10, but good to know that you like it more than
and I think the Blue Lagoon I've had for longer. I've played many more times, but Babylonia like impressed me a bit more for sure.
Right. All right, my number 7 is a game you've mentioned before. It's pretty high up on my list, and that is Biblios. This is a game I bought honestly on a whim. I hadn't really heard that much about it. I saw it on the product page on the Canadian retailer that I was buying games from, and it looked really interesting with the artwork. Desmond's getting all mad because of how much he loves Biblios. He's like whining over here. Desmond, come up here. Let's go. You can be on camera for this one. How about that? So I bought it, and it sat on my shelf for a little bit. I think I played it 2 players first, and it was like a game where I was like, yeah, it was fun, and I didn't really think too much about it, and I didn't really revisit it until you told me, hey, did you know that Biblios is like the number one game of one of the guys on the Board Game Barrage podcast?
Yeah, Mark.
And I was like, really? And I was like, I haven't played that game in a while. And I went back to it, and having played a bunch more games now and really like started to appreciate different like design elements of different games and auction games and everything a little bit more, I played that and it was just like, okay, like I had only played 2. Now that I'm playing with 3 and 4, there's some brilliance here that I wasn't really keeping or wasn't factoring in. And when we played a 4-player game for the first time, I think it was on Tabletop Simulator, that's when I was like, this is a brilliant game. It's so much fun, and sometimes you end with like no points, or you really feel like you just had the worst game of your life, but yet it's just the way that the pieces fall because of the way the dice are being manipulated, or because you don't know what you've kept in your hand and compared to what someone else has in their hand. You're trying to guess like how many cards of a certain color someone has bought. It's just, it's so much fun. It's so agonizing, but we always end up laughing around the table. Yeah. I love it at 3 and 4. I will play it at 2, but I think 3 and 4 is really where it's meant to be played. And again, like I've mentioned before, we both sort of realized, at least I have, how much I really do enjoy auction mechanics in games. And I feel like that whole system of having to decide when you look at a card, am I going to give this to the group? Am I going to put it into the deck for later? Am I going to take it for myself? Is a great way of doing that, especially when you take what you think is a great card and you draw the next one, you go, well, damn, I would have taken that. Yeah. So you're like, oh, I'll put it in the deck. And then you draw another and you're like, well, I just gave them 3 gold or whatever. So yeah, Biblios at number 7, really great. It might change over time, but as of right now, it's a game I just always want to play.
Nice. I didn't expect to be quite this high on your list. I think it was, in my high 20s, 28, 29 or something like that. Amazing game that, I remember seeing this one on your shelf for a long time, and I was never interested in it at all because of, like, it just looked dry. Like, there's, like, monks, and it's, like, a bit with coins and stuff, and I was like, whatever. Yeah. And then it took hearing Mark on Board Game Barrage say it was his number 1 game of all time for me to be like, we got to try this.
Yeah, so Mark, thank you for making me play it again, for making Carlo realize there was something special there. Yeah. We both appreciate it a lot more now.
It's an amazing game. Mm-hmm. All right, my number 7 game of all time. It's actually funny because this is Mark's number 2 game of all time, which is Arboretum. Mm-hmm. This is a game that we've had for years. This is such a good game. By this point, we'll have a video on our channel that I just did recently about why I think Arboretum is best with 4 players, and you can watch that to get a better idea of how it plays. But it's a hand management game where everything you hold in your hand at the end of the game is going to determine what you and as well as your opponents have the right to score. It's a very mean game, very cutthroat, despite the kind of pretty artwork with the trees and everything. You are building a tableau in front of you, and it's kind of, there is still some puzzling to do, and it is fun to kind of build out your tableau, but the brilliance of the game, what is actually fun about it, is the hand management as well as what's in the discard piles and taking cards from other people's discard piles. It's a game that is like every single turn from the very beginning is just pure agony, similar to Biblios. You never have an easy choice. I know Mark always says when he talks about this game that he wishes he could just pass on his turn, and I think that's the best way to put it, is like, really, you don't want to take your turn because it involves discarding a card that you know someone is going to probably take that's useful for someone else, or a card that might have helped you, and the card you play in front of you is revealing information for something you're going for, so that your opponents just immediately know, no one discards, you got to hold on to those maples because Carlo has them, and you're like, so everything you do is basically working against you. I've played this with people who get really frustrated by it. Some people don't like it as much, but it seems like the people who like it really, really like it and want to play it again. Yeah. Even my sister-in-law, who doesn't normally like very mean games, loves Arboretum. She always requests to play it. I don't know what it is, but some people just really click with this game. And for what it does with just basically a simple deck of cards is absolutely brilliant. This is one of my favorite games, and one of my favorite just small box card games in general. Not my absolute favorite, but very close.
Yeah, it's for the same kind of effect that Lost Cities has, where you say you want to pass your turn, right? Yeah. It strikes that same box for me, and it's agonizing, but in the best way possible, and it's more involved than Lost Cities with that mechanic. Right. Like Lost Cities, you're just playing to these rows, whereas with Arboretum, having to figure out how you're going to position your trees and with the numbers and with all these different types of trees you're playing with and everything, you end up with a way more complex board setup than you're ever going to have in Lost Cities. So I love it. It's not quite as high on my list, but that's again also partly because I haven't played it as much recently.
For sure.
But I think as I revisit it and play it more, that spark will return, and it's one that I don't think will ever fully leave my top 50 because of how much fun I have when I play it.
Right. Yeah. And like I said before, Lost Cities is the better 2-player game. It's just at 3 and 4 where Arboretum becomes absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, it's a better 4-player game than Lost Cities, that's for sure.
Wow, that's really kind of you to say.
Great pick. All right, my number 6, and I have a feeling there might be a lot of you that are coming to this video specifically to see where I was going to place this game.
Wow,
and that is
this low?
Marvel Champions. So Marvel Champions is obviously a game I love. I honestly I'm not even going to say a lot about it here because I feel like if you follow our channel in any capacity, you know what I love about this game. I think it's one of the most accessible card games. I think that if you love the Marvel theme and you love card games, there's not a lot to dislike about this game. The fact that every single pack you buy, every hero pack, every villain pack, gives you a whole bunch new to play with, but also that they're never ignoring the old cards and everything you've invested in either. You buy new cards that now allow you to build decks with cards that you might have thought were irrelevant, or there was just a card introduced into the game that specifically calls out a specific card that was introduced before, saying grab this card from your deck and put it into play. So now this old card is completely relevant in a new way. Like the design space, the thematics, the way that they keep finding ways to integrate these heroes into the game is, I have to give them tons of credit for being able to, for this long, find new and interesting ways to say, here's how we're going to stretch this design space in these new interesting directions. I adore this game. I'm going to be this is probably my most played game of 2021 because of how much content I've done on it. It's probably going to still be up there in 2022. There's 5 other games I like better than it still, but that being said, it's in the top 10, which out of a whole lot of games we've played, means a lot. So I'll leave it there, but if you're wondering where it was going to slot in, it's number 6, and there are 5 games, but you should definitely check out the 5 games ahead of it because I think they all are in that spot ahead of it.
Nice. When I did my predictions, I thought this was going to come in around number 4 or 5 for you, but yeah, I mean, it's a game that I can absolutely see why people love the game. If I was more into the Marvel theme, I would probably buy a bit of it and play it solo once in a while. Yeah. I think from what I've experienced, I think it would play best solo. I have to say, I've enjoyed the deck building or the deck construction part of it more than actually playing the system where you're fighting the boss or whatever. But yeah, I've had fun every time I play it. I just don't love the game.
Yeah, fair enough.
All right, my number 6 game here is also a card game. It's my highest ranked 2-player only game of all time. That is Battle Line. This is the second Reiner Knizia game in the top 10 so far for me, for those keeping track at home. We talked about Lost Cities quite a bit already, both of us at different points in the list. There's something about Battle Line, or I should say a couple things that I love about Battle Line a bit more than Lost Cities. The fact that you have the spots on the board where you're fighting over basically the, first to win either 5 flags anywhere or 5 battles or whatever, or any 3 consecutive, means that where you play the cards out on there is so important. And similar to what I mentioned about Arboretum, where you never really want to play a card because as soon as you do, it reveals to your opponent what you're going after, is very similar in Battle Line because you're basically playing 9 simultaneous poker hands that have a max of 3 cards each. So you can add, once you've played a card out on one battle, if you add a second card there, let's say I put 2 3s. Now my opponent knows I'm going for 3 of a kind 3s. So you always want to be like kind of spreading your hand out and just not giving too many hints. You put 1 card there, 1 card there, 1 card there, and it's this kind of guessing game of who's going to go first playing their second card in a row, and then you kind of know, okay, what do I have to use to beat that? But then there's the deck of tactics cards, and this is what makes the game like kind of next level, is there's these 10 or 8 tactics cards that at the end of your turn, instead of drawing a regular card, you can draw a tactics card, and they let you manipulate the board in some way. You can either change the value of a card somewhere, make it so you can add a 4th card. There's all kinds of stuff that switches it up. Every time I've shown this to someone, they seem like I lent this card out during the pandemic to a bunch of people. Sometimes I would lend out like 4 or 5 2-player games, and Battle Line was unanimously always the one where someone said, man, Battle Line was really good. Like, I liked Patchwork, I liked Jaipur, whatever, but everyone seemed to love Battle Line, and I've gone back and played it a bunch more recently. It doesn't have quite as many plays as a lot of the games that are higher up on this list for me, but I've only owned it for a few years. But yeah, if I'm just going to be playing a 2-player only head-to-head kind of dueling game, Battle Line to me is the best one out there.
Yeah, honestly, I know you like this a lot more than I do, and granted, I've played it I think twice, maybe 3 times ever. I really enjoyed it, and it was the same effect where the first time we played it, I was really surprised by it because I didn't go in. The artwork isn't anything that's going to necessarily catch your eye in the same way that Biblios isn't, and So I remember thinking I was lukewarm on it until we started, like, we were in the thick of it, and I started to really realize the strategy and the different ways you can win and everything. And that's when I really started to appreciate it. I think I would have to play it a lot more to really have it, like, start to crack this list and make it higher up.
Right.
But I see the genius of it, and so many of the things I love about Lost Cities are in the essence and the core of Battle Line, just implemented in a different way. So I'm not surprised on your list. I'm a little surprised of how high it is, but not because I don't think it belongs there. Just I didn't realize that it was that much that you loved it.
And it was, I think a few weeks ago, I played 2 or 3 games in a row with my brother-in-law, and before that I played it with someone else like a couple times, and if I took out the last few weeks, it might not have even cracked the top 10, but it was those recent plays where, especially when you play with someone who's played the game enough as well, that it does sort of unravel this extra layer of depth and of strategy that, yeah, it's just another one of those games that does so much with so little, like just a deck of cards and these 9 little tokens for the battle lines.
Yeah, awesome. My number 5 is a 2-player game as well. I absolutely adore this game. I have played so many plays of it, and that is Seven Wonders Duel. So I was actually someone who didn't even play Seven Wonders before I played this game, and I remember hearing from you that a lot of the criticisms of Seven Wonders was that, or not a lot of the criticism, but one criticism was that you couldn't play with 2 players, and there was a way you could, but it wasn't very good, or involved like a dummy player or whatever the case was. And then this came along and is, in my opinion, the best version of Seven Wonders that is out there. Yes, you can't play with like 6 or 7 people, but it is just such a phenomenal 2-player game. I have played so many games of this with the physical copy. I've played so many games of this with the BGA implementation. It's probably one of my most played games in my collection. It's one of the earliest games I bought. With the different win conditions, you never feel like you can just craft a strategy and say, I'm just going to carry this out to the end and I'm getting lucky with where the cards end up being, because it's very rare that you get lucky with the science cards, the war cards, the military cards, and the blue cards. Like you can't get lucky with all of them. So if you notice that someone is getting lucky with getting a bunch of resources, there's things you can do to really put the pressure on them in other ways than now that they have to spend a bunch of their time defending against that, right? So it is a game that I've never not enjoyed playing, and I've always been surprised by how many unique sessions I have that don't feel like a previous session. Like after you played a game a lot of times, sometimes you can craft a strategy. You're like, oh, I know I'll do this or I'll do that, and suddenly I play with someone and I'm like, I'm being forced to do something here that I was not expecting I was going to have to, or I've never had to do before. And yeah, it's a phenomenal game. You can play it very easily on BGA, Board Game Arena, if you haven't yet. There's 2 expansions that I actually think are both brilliant in different ways. Pantheon adds in an entirely new aspect to the game. Well, they both do. And then Agora actually adds in a new win condition as well, which, you know, if you needed more ways to win that game, it's great. I think both, or at least one of the expansions, is on BGA as well to try. I know you love this game as well, or at least have enjoyed it when we've played it. We played it on Tabletop Simulator too. Yep. But yeah, this is one I never will get rid of, I don't think, and also one that is probably one of my first go-to 2-player games to suggest with someone when they ask, hey, do you want to play a 2-player game? I'll usually bring this out as an option, even if they don't pick it. It's there as an option because I'll always love playing it.
Yeah, it's a really good game, and honestly, I think it would have probably been somewhere in the 70, 80 for me, like right. Not super close to cracking the list, but also it's one I will never turn down a game of. It's especially on Board Game Arena because it keeps track of all the costs and everything for you. It's so easy to play without having to ever count out, oh, what would this cost to trade for this resource, whatever. But yeah, awesome game. Yeah, I knew this would be high up on your list too.
Yeah.
All right, my number 5 is the game that, well, I'll just say right now, is the only one that I thought was going to be a crossover on our top 10. It is a game that I don't own, but Dylan does. This is Keyflower. Yeah. This is a brilliant game. It is the second best worker placement game of all time. It has auctions baked into it, which is what sets it apart in that realm of worker placement games. And the fact that it plays 2 to 6 players. I mean, the first time we played it with 2 players, and we still thought it was brilliant. And since then, we've played it with more. I think we've only ever played it with at most 4. I don't think we've quite gone up to 5 yet. And that 3 or 4 is probably the sweet spot. But we still have to do the chaotic 6-player game one day just because, right?
We have to try it.
Yeah, but
then we can be the people who vote on Board Game Geek that it's best with 6.
Well, we'll see. I don't know. That might be a little too much. There might be too much downtime. But
some people just want to watch the world burn.
It's true. It's an amazing game where you're auctioning off tiles that are available from kind of a market in the middle with other players for the right to gain the tile to put in your own kind of terrain or territory, which players can then use the ones in their own or other players' territories. But then if you use the tiles in their territories, your meeples kind of stay behind and that player gains them at the end of the round, so there's that cost. Or you can also be using those tiles in the middle before someone gains the tile, but if so, they take any meeples that were on it if they won the bid. So, and it plays over 4 seasons. There's different tiles that come out every time. There's different kind of goals that you get or scoring conditions that you hold at the beginning that you get to. Oh, Desmond's really getting in there, eh?
He loves this game.
Absolutely. I think he beat us last time. But yeah, you're kind of trying to plan ahead as much as you can. It's very cutthroat. I love the aspect of looking across the table and you don't know what meeples or of what colors are behind someone's screen, so you don't know what they're going to use to bid or if they can outbid you, and you sit there thinking, if I bid 2 meeples, is this person actually going to bid 3 of that color? Do they actually have that? There's so much to consider. You get in each other's way so much. Literally, my only complaint I can think of about the game is that the part about where you put your tiles down and you point your roads to kind of build your network where you can run your resources across is... It doesn't like necessarily detract from the game, but everything about the game to me is like brilliant, and that kind of feels like I wish there were no roads and you could just move it, like the movement was just you move it to this tile, you move it to that one, but having to kind of connect, sometimes it slows the game down, people trying to figure out, well, if I point this road here, whatever, especially when you gain multiple tiles at the end of the round, I feel like it would just be a bit snappier if it was just the worker placement in the auctions, but that being said, it's a game that you own, but I absolutely am going to buy one day, and it's one of my favorite games of all time, obviously.
Yeah, I will have more to say about this maybe later.
Yeah. Maybe immediately?
Not immediately.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I'm going to move on to my number four game, which is Castles of Burgundy. I know you probably expected this to be in the top 10. I love this game. I played this a whole ton. I think I introduced this to you. I think I got it first. I know you enjoyed it as well. I think it's a best of a 2-player game, but I've enjoyed it every player count. I feel like it's one of those games that it seems complicated to people at first when they first start to learn it. They're like, oh, there's a lot of moving pieces here I'm trying to keep track of. And then when you really get into it, you realize, actually, this is a pretty quick moving game. And especially at 2, when you play with someone else who also knows how to play, you can actually have a pretty quick game of Castles of Burgundy. And for how quick you end up having that session be, there's a lot going on in that game and a lot of strategy. It's oh my God, Desmond! I know you're so excited about this title. It's a classic game. I mean, it's high up on the BGG rankings, but I was late to the party on it. But I enjoy. I think I've told you I enjoy dicing games, but I enjoy when you can manipulate the dice. It's not all luck based, and you can do things to mitigate the luck and change your luck and everything. And the way that you can manipulate the dice to, I really need a 1 to be able to grab this tile to add to my board, and then that's going to allow me to chain that when I place this to grab another tile that is going to steal that from the other person. There's moments that you have where it's just like we've mentioned with other games, where it's just these brilliant moments that maybe not so much as the other ones we mentioned, where it's like this is could be the game-changing moment, but it's ones it's ones that you will point to and say, oh, that was a big play, and that was something I'm going to remember from this session, whatever the case may be. So yeah, it's a phenomenal game. I'm not going to say a whole lot more because I've honestly talked about this game in a lot of videos right now, and it's a game that I'm sure you've heard of. But if you haven't checked this out, there's many ways to play. There's official apps. It's on BGA now. The physical version is accessible. There's now an anniversary edition as well. I would highly recommend playing it. Try it at 2 players. Play it a few times with someone you're both familiar with, so you don't have to have the explanation time. I think you'll really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a great game, and it's one that I've always wondered, like, is there something I'm missing or something wrong with me that I don't consider it one of my favorite games of all time? Because I know a lot of people who have played it would put it in their top 10, their top 20, whatever. And so when I was trying to put together my top 50 list, I actually went and played it again on Board Game Arena because it had been probably at least a year or 2 since I played it. Yeah. And again, I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it, and I think I've only played 3 Stefan Feld games so far: Castles of Burgundy, Castles of Tuscany, and Forum Trajanum. Yeah. I haven't played some of those other ones that get really highly spoken about, like Macau and Bora Bora and whatever, In the Year of the Dragon. But there's something about his designs that they always feel like sort of in that 7 or 7.5 out of 10 for me in terms of ranking, but I haven't had one go over that cusp where I love the game. And I think with Castles of Burgundy, it's that some of the tiles are a lot pretty interesting the way they work, and then other ones feel a little bit more, not mundane is pretty too harsh of a word, but what I like most about the game is the puzzle of the pieces on your board and how quickly are you going to fill them in to try and get those point rewards for getting them, or when are you going to get that castle one that lets you get an extra turn or whatever. But a lot of the rest of it feels a bit 2-point salad-y for my taste, just in terms of my top favorite games of all time.
Yeah.
But it's one that I enjoy every time I play. I will never turn down a game of it, and it is a classic for a reason. I think it's extremely well designed and a very good game for people who are new getting into the hobby, as well as people who've been in it for a while.
Absolutely. So that is my number 4.
All right, my number 4 is Carcassonne. This is...
I had this in your top 3.
Oh, okay.
Wow,
No,
okay.
it fell out of the top.
Wow.
For a long time, I would have had it in my top 3. And I'll say right now, if I was talking about this as a non-2-player game, if it was just 3 to 5, it would probably still be in my top 50, but it would be like maybe in my 30s or 40s. It could be way further down the list. This is essentially 2-player Carcassonne is my number 4 game of all time. If you watch my recent video, games I've played more than 100 times, you can go see what I have to say about the game, but it's the head-to-head duel of this game that feels like when you play this with someone who has played it kind of an equal amount or has that similar kind of level of kind of experience with the game or strategy or whatnot, it kind of reveals these new layers that didn't hit me the first couple times I played it. It was the game that got me into modern day gaming, so there's definitely a bit of a bias there, but I still think the game holds up incredibly well, and that aspect in that 2-player game especially of, first off, you're building out the board, which that's what all player counts. That's something that just I absolutely love about it. The board's going to look... I've played it probably 300 times. The board looks different every time. But my favorite aspect is that aspect of when you draw a tile, what are you going to do with it in terms of, are you going to place it somewhere to gain you more points, or are you going to place it somewhere where it gets in your opponent's way? And even the way that it gets in your opponent's way, when you play this game with like beginners and stuff, they won't see it at first. Even if you play with someone who's somewhat experienced, they might not realize what exactly you can do, or they're like, you'll add a castle or a city piece to there, and they say like, why are you doing that? Not only is that a city piece, but it has a shield on it. Why are you giving me 2 points? It's like, well, because you were 1 piece away from capping that thing. Now I gave you 3 sides to it, and the game is, now one of your followers is locked down, and you're not going to be able to complete that to get double points. They're like, oh, okay, fair enough. So you start sometimes adding pieces to each other's stuff, or adding stuff near someone's piece so that there's fewer tiles left that they can actually place in between. There's all kinds of things that you can do that are clever to get in people's way, and the fact that once you know how to play and you're playing with someone familiar with it, you can play this in 20, 30 minutes is just... I think it's a classic for a reason. It's been around for like 20 years. I will never, ever get rid of this. And yeah, if you're someone who has either not tried Carcassonne before, or you tried it once with 4 or 5 players, just keep in mind it's a totally different game at that player count where you're basically just trying to do the best you can for yourself. Try it at 2. Try it with someone who can play, who wants to play it a bit more cutthroat, getting in each other's way, and see if it changes your mind.
You'll never get rid of it, but one day I'm going to buy you a new box cover for this game. You can frame the old one. You can keep it in like, some sort of case or whatever as a nostalgia thing, but that box cover needs some sort of update. Maybe get the like anniversary edition.
Just I'm going to. Yeah, the 20th anniversary edition looks beautiful. The one I have now, my friend bought it and left it in the back seat of his car, and it just got completely
Who is this hooligan who's leaving your
I won't say his name on camera for his sake. I don't want him to get too much hate in the comments.
Send a bunch of hate mail.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing else in the game got warped or anything. But yeah, that is Carcassonne.
Awesome. Yeah, I just haven't played this enough, honestly, to include it. And when I have played it, it's only been at 2 players once. And everyone has always played a lot more than me at the table. I need to find someone who wants to play just 2-player Carcassonne, both being entry-level players, and grow in skill with each other to basically then go into the games with our gaming groups to play Carcassonne and actually feel like I can compete, because I always just get slaughtered.
Okay, well, one day, you know what we should do? Play a bunch of games of Fjords and Carcassonne, just 2 players back and forth.
That'd be great. Okay, sweet. My number 3 is Keyflower. So this, I knew it was going to be my top 10. I surprised myself a little bit that it made it to 3, but I have absolutely loved this game every time I played it. I honestly actually considered having this at 2 or 1, and that's because my sessions of Keyflower have left me always wanting to play again, which doesn't always happen. Sometimes even the games I love, the games that I'm like, yeah, I've had my fill. Whereas Keyflower, I could, if anyone was like, do you want to play a session right now, and I had time, I would do another one right after. Every game's different. You've said a lot of it already, but I'll just add that like the elements of like which tiles are going to be out in a certain game compared to other games changes Keyflower a lot. And we've had some games where, the green meeples are super rare, where at other games there's multiple ways to get them, so they lose their effectiveness and their efficiency. We've had some games where certain those tools are in really high demand, where I've been caught off guard because I'm like, the other times I've played, I've had no problem getting it, so I didn't even think to try to like manage my inventory of them, and all of a sudden we get to like fall, and I'm going, I have no system to get this tool I need, and I'm going to have to start going to someone else's village and giving them my meeples to do that. So you have to constantly, every single time you play, think about the game and approach it a little differently. But the genius is 100% in the auctioning system. That is where the most fun comes out of it. That's where you start to think like, what colors do you have behind your little player board there? Do you have any blues left? Do you have any reds? Like, if I bet red, are you even going to be able to be in contention? And there's always a moment where, you bet something and you think like, oh, I don't think they have enough yellows. And they all of a sudden turns out they have like all yellow meeples behind their screen. And you're like, well, I have to completely abandon this strategy. And then you're trying to find a backup strategy. It's such an unbelievable game. I don't know how I didn't find it till I did, and I don't know how it's not brought up more often. And again, everyone has their own opinion, but it's just, we have enjoyed this game so much. I'm so glad it's in your top five. It was 5, right, for you?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm so glad it's in your top 5 as well. With the fact that we both have this game in our top 5 when we don't have a whole ton of crossovers in the same groupings on this list, I think it's a testament to how good this game is. This is one I absolutely want to bring when we go to a convention in 2022. I think we're going to go to a convention in 2022. Yeah. I want to bring Keyflower or find a table where it's being played, just to start playing with more people and other people who appreciate it as much as we do, and just to get more plays of it in, or maybe introduce it to other people, because I think the world who has not parts of the world who have not experienced Keyflower need to experience it, because it's just such a phenomenal experience, unparalleled in so many different ways.
Absolutely. I'm going to put you on the spot here for something.
Oh boy.
A little while ago, a couple months ago, you did a video of 7 games you'll never get rid of. Mm-hmm. I don't believe this was on your list.
It wasn't on my list.
Would you ever consider getting rid of Keyflower?
Yeah, so there's a few games that are in my top 10 that I didn't put on that list, and I think it's because I approached it from a lot of accessibility to, of like, games I'm always going to want to introduce to someone, or they're like, they fit into, like Keyflower. Keyflower, I've had a partner in the past who hated Keyflower, like did not like it. So I would only ever play with certain groups. So I felt like Keyflower is one that if all of a sudden I found myself in a situation where the people I was around didn't enjoy Keyflower, I could get rid of it and just play the BGA implementation.
Fair enough. Right? You know what? I didn't factor in the BGA aspect.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
you're off the hook on this one.
Yeah. So it's more so that, and my box is also like completely torn up one side. So I actually do need a new version. So I'm hoping this game gets some sort of re-release that's all fancy one day and I can just buy a new version of it. But yeah.
I've also heard people speak highly of Keeper and Key to the City London, so maybe we'll try some of those, and who knows, maybe one of those will dethrone Keyflower one day.
Yeah, awesome.
All right. My number 3 pick, whatever, I'll just get straight to it. Yeah, well, you should know what it is now.
Well, I don't know. I thought I knew what your top three were, and I was confused. And I didn't know the order and what the other ones were going to be necessarily. But now that Carcassonne's on the top 3, I'm wondering which one is in the top 3.
Okay, well then you know what the top 2 is, but number 3 is Modern Art.
Oh, of course. Wow, I did not realize that's going to be your top 3.
And it's a crime that it didn't make your top 50. This is the one we were talking about off camera the other day that I was like, if it hasn't come up yet, there's no way it's in his top 20, and I was just...
I've only played it the one time.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I thought you played it a few times.
No,
okay.
I love it, but I think it's when I just need to play more to make sure like where I'm going to slot it.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. So we've talked a lot about auctions in this video and previous videos. This is my favorite auction game of all time. It basically has 5 different types of auctions, plays over 4 rounds, and you're basically playing as an art house. You have a private screen with your money behind, and you're just holding auctions one after the other, going around the table. Everyone is involved the whole time because... unless you eventually pass on an auction, but even when you're out, you can still watch all the other players outbid each other. It's a game that always has people laughing and trash talking around the table. The fact that you have all your money hidden behind a screen has everyone always guessing. You don't know quite who's in the lead. Sometimes you might think, oh, that person has made some really good money off selling these paintings or whatever. And it's a game where you have to not only react to the direction the market's going by other players, but you yourself can dictate where it goes by deciding which cards you play and when. There's 5 different artists, so you're playing... The more you play cards of a certain artist, the more you're going to drive up the value of their paintings, not only for that round, but for future rounds. Their kind of popularity is going to carry over. But you can also... Part of the puzzle and the fun of the game is trying to decide, when you have a card in your hand, you think, I could probably get a lot of money for this round, but what if I hold on to it to the next round or the round after that? Then it might be worth even a lot more money. So you have to weigh what card to auction off when, and just the fact that it has 5 different types of auctions in the game. But again, the rule book is like 3 or 4 pages. It's that pure like Reiner Knizia brilliance. And the reason why it's this high on the list, like of any game this high on the list, at least in my top 5, it's for sure the one I've played the fewest times. But what has it in here is that of any game I've tried that was new to me in the last 4 or 5 years, and this game came out in like 1993 or something, but I only played it for the first time a couple years ago, and for any game that's been new to me in the last, let's say, 5 years, 7 years, it's the only game that after the very first play and every subsequent play, I keep second guessing and asking myself, is this maybe my favorite game of all time?
Wow.
Because I think it's so much fun every time, and the only reason, like, who knows, in the future it might end up getting into that number 2 or number 1 spot. It's just the 2 games I'm going to talk about after I've played way more, have been way more influential for me as a gamer. But yeah, I could talk about Modern Art all day. It's such an incredible game.
Yeah, like I said, I've only played it the one time. I absolutely loved it. It will likely make my top 50 and be fairly high after I've played it more. I'll just add to stress even more. My favorite part about it is the different auction types. Again, realizing how much we enjoy auction games, the fact that there's all these different types of auctions in one game, and they each affect the game in different ways. That was my favorite part about it, is realizing how I'm approaching each one. But even just in general, it surprised me so much. I never heard about this game before you hooked me onto it. And even when you were first introducing it, it was one of those moments where it's like, I know I'll probably enjoy this, but like I'd rather play this game. I'd rather play this game because it's just one that for some reason, just based on the look alone and the description, I'm like, I don't know if I gravitate towards it. So I'm so glad that you discovered it and really dove into it and shared it with me, because now it's one that I don't think I would ever turn down, and I in fact would want to go back to play more often to see where it's going to slot in on my list.
For sure. I'm going to be suggesting this game in almost every game night in the future. So.
Yeah, awesome pick. All right, my number 2 game. I know you know what my top 2 are. I know what yours are. Maybe we don't know the order. Yeah. My number 2 game is the greatest Uwe Rosenberg game of all time, and that is A Feast for Odin. So A Feast for Odin, I brought this up so many times on the channel that it's become a running joke between us and our friends that we're going to create a drinking game on every time Dylan mentions Feast for Odin, you got to take a shot. Hey, if you guys want to start that in the comments, go by all means. This is such a brilliant, brilliant game. I love it so much. I considered for a long time putting this at number 1. I sent Carlo a picture of the game that's going to end up as number 1 against this on the Pub Meeple rankings, and because I sat there looking at it for so long, knowing that was the biggest choice I was going to make. I've talked about this so much, but I'll just really quickly. It's a worker placement style game where you have so many actions on the main board and so many different paths you can take. Every vertical column is a different amount of your meeples, your Vikings that you're gonna have to place in order to take that action. I use a different strategy almost every time I play. I'm not like this scrub who does the same strategy every single time.
I'll have more to say about that in my defense after. I'll let you finish your bit first.
It's so much fun to put figure out the puzzle of how you're going to get to victory. And also, I love polyomino games, and the fact that an Uwe Rosenberg big box game like this with cards and resources and action spaces found a way to weave in polyominoes in a way that I think is super elegant and super interesting with the main board and the additional boards you're grabbing and the storehouses and everything. Every time I even think about this game, all I want to do is play another session of it. It's a game that never gets old for me, never gets tiring. It's a crime that I haven't got the Norwegians expansion yet because of how much I've heard that it even improves the experience. I honestly, if I could only, we should do a video one time if you could only own like 5 games in your collection. I think we've talked about that, but if I could only own 1 game in my collection, I would probably choose this over what I've chosen at number 1, just because if I could come back to this game over and over and over again and never get bored of it. I love it. I think it's a crime you don't love it more, even though it's on your list. And like we've said, eventually one day we're going to have probably next month, we're going to have a big head-to-head video on our channel with this and a game that I'm pretty sure is coming up for Carlo pretty soon, that I think people are going to be excited for. So yeah, that's A Feast for Odin. I adore this game. It might be number 1 one day, but for now it's number 2.
Cool. Yeah, I'll tell you why this scrub tries a similar strategy.
Try to explain yourself.
So
here.
There's 2 reasons. The first, and this is the least or the less important reason, is that the spots that have the dice rolling and stuff like that, and even the card play from your hands, don't offer enough incentive for me to go in those directions. So what I end up doing, because I feel the main reason, and the game feels like there's not as much player interaction as I'd like, and so because of that,
this isn't criticize Feast for Odin.
No, but I'm trying to. It's because the game feels like I'm trying to beat my own high score, not trying to beat my opponents. Because I have no idea how I can't really stop my opponents. I've never have any idea of how many points they're going to score. So every time I play, I'm trying to think, can I hit that 100-point mark, which I don't think I've ever hit. And to me, it feels like the optimal way to score the highest points in this game is to take take those islands and get out in the islands early and then get your spaces filled out to get more income. And the point potential for having all those extra islands that you discover seems so high that I'm always trying to chase that high of get as many of the islands to take them away from other players, as well as to try and crack that high score of mine.
Right.
And then a lot of the time I fall short. I've lost many times, and now because of this, I'm going to specifically try something different next time we play, just because. But yeah, I feel like the game is like pointing me in a certain direction, and I don't want to try the same thing, but I'm always like look at it and feel like I kind of just have to go for that all-out strategy of exploring the whole world again.
For anyone who was unaware, the reason we bring this up is because I have all the scoring sheets from the times we played, and I happened to look back one time and realize that you can see where people win for certain strategies because they'll get zeros in some categories and then large amounts. And every single game we played, Carlo got the majority, if not all of his points, from getting these island tiles and like neglected almost all the other areas. So now I was joking about how next time we play, if I go after that strategy, he's gonna be like, what do I do on my turn? That spot's taken. Like, I can't get the island tile.
Well, that's the thing. One game I actually wanted to take the ships, and everyone kept taking the ship spots. I'm like, I guess I'll do something else. I'll default to the island strategy.
Don't blame this on us.
Yeah, no, it's an amazing game. I think this was like number 27 on my list, and it's so good that it didn't even make his number 1 spot.
Yeah. You know what? One day. One day.
All right. That's enough, you know.
We'll save it for the head-to-head video.
Yeah, exactly. So my number 2 favorite game of all time is Race for the Galaxy. I've talked about this a lot on the channel before. It's one, again, I talked about in my recent games I've played more than 100 times video. Tableau building game. I'm not even going to describe how it plays. Everyone probably knows by now. The brilliance in this game has really revealed itself to me over time. There aren't... Like, a lot of games I play and something clicks, and then I play and play and play, and then eventually the game kind of phases out for me, or my play over for most games tends to dwindle at a certain point. And for Race for the Galaxy, it feels like it is still increasing today after over 100 plays, and that's something that's really rare. Like, I can't think of any game that after this many plays is still feeling like a better game to me, and I've only played the base game. Still haven't tried any of the expansions. I know there's a bunch of them out there. If you're a big fan of Race to the Galaxy, please let me know in the comments below, because I keep hearing that I got to go one of two ways. Either get the first 3 expansions. I think it's Brink of War, Rebel vs. Imperium, and I don't remember what the other one's called right now. Whatever it is. Or I want to go the Alien Artifacts route. Please let me know. But it's that brilliance of, like, sometimes there's certain cards that only after you've played the game a certain amount of times you realize that's when that card is useful. Or that would be a good time to, like, combine these 2 cards. Or you get better and better at picking up on which phases your opponent's going to play based on what they have out, so you get more efficient with the ones you pick because you know you can piggyback off of their actions. It's a game that I will never get rid of. I'll never get tired of playing it. It's my favorite tableau builder, favorite card game. I guess it has a couple of tokens, but yeah, there's just something brilliant and very addictive, and especially because of the fact that it's on Board Game Arena and there's an app. Once, like the digital version, you can play. The game takes 5 to 10 minutes. There's no game that packs that amount of strategy and difficult decisions in that quick of a playtime. It's just such an impressive design, and I'll basically almost automatically buy anything that Tom Lehman designs this day out because of games like Race for the Galaxy, as well as Res Arcana, which was I think it was my number 11 pick.
Yeah. I honestly, my guess would have been this at number 1, so it doesn't surprise me that it's here. I have enjoyed every single time I played this game. The reason I don't enjoy it as much, honestly, which might be so weird to some people, is just the theme. I'm not a big space. I like some things with space, but like Mass Effect, for instance, I love, but with Race for the Galaxy, something about the theme and the iconography, it doesn't do it for me. Like, if they were to reskin this game as a fantasy themed game, it honestly it would resonate with me so much. And it might, again, that might be weird to some people because you should be able to maybe get over the theme hurdle and tap into the gameplay. But in terms of like the gameplay mechanics, I understand why so many people love it. I understand why you're hooked on it. Obviously, that entire system of the phases and everything has now bled into other games because of how popular it is. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me that it is where it is. Like I said, I even thought it could have been number 1. So
yeah, fair enough. Just such an efficient, amazing game every second of it.
Yeah, great choice. All right, it's finally time. Our number 1 game of all time. Maybe you guys have already guessed what they are by now. My number 1 game of all time is, of course, Gloomhaven. This is a game that is on here, and for now, and it might change over time. I mean, partly because Frosthaven's coming out, and who knows how that experience will go, but also because I'm done with the Gloomhaven campaign, and so over time, it's going to slowly drift in the same way the Pandemic Legacy does. But as of right now, in terms of how much I've gotten out of a game, even at that price, how many sessions I've played, the memories I have tied to it, the amount of times we've gathered gathered and what it's been like to have those group of friends together. It's incomparable to me in many of the same ways that you have fond memories of Carcassonne and Race to the Galaxy and what your number one game is. I feel like that's a lot of the reasons why Gloomhaven is on this list for me, but also I just love the aspects of dungeon crawlers and the fact that, even though I wasn't a D&D player, so much of that kind of the essence of it leaks in, and it's Gloomhaven owes D&D for a lot of that. And it's a game that I can't even explain why I love sitting down at the table and looking at it all set up so much, but it just puts a smile on my face knowing that we're kind of going on this adventure, diving in through another scenario. Even if I'm not like super invested in the story at all times, I like that there's this story thread carrying us through it. I love customizing my character. I love retiring that character and having them be this character of infamy that shows up in the storyline here and there. I like starting new characters and seeing how I'm going to craft them. I like watching someone else play a character that I've played in like an entirely new way or with a new strategy or playstyle, taking new cards. It's going to be very hard for this game to be topped in terms of the memories I have with it, but over time, because I'm done with it, it will obviously shift and it will change. But for now, it sits here. I think you probably expected it to be number one. Yeah. I debated for a while Feast for Odin taking number one because of the longevity, but I figured if there was ever a year that it was like, next year, it might not be number one anymore. So if there's ever a year to give it that award and really give it its due, this was the one. And it is also, I don't want to make it seem like I'm just sticking with the BGG rankings or anything. It is actually the number one game on BGG rankings right now. It just so happens that I just happen to full-heartedly agree. I absolutely love it. And I think it's kind of funny that it's my number one and your number 50. Like, it's on the two sides of our list. And I say that because I honestly, for me, and I hope for you guys, it's interesting to see just how differing our opinions are. Even when we both like a game, we like them to different degrees, and our lists have been pretty drastically different.
Yeah, much more than I expected, yeah.
Yeah, so that is Gloomhaven. You probably know I already love it, and with Frosthaven coming out, you'll probably see a whole lot more content on that universe. So.
Yeah, and you did mention in one of our previous videos that one of your favorite things to do, just like in general, like regular pastime, is just to sit around opening envelopes. So the fact that the game...
So many. Yeah, I did.
The fact that the game is just packed with envelopes is just right up your alley.
Just today, I opened my mail. I poured myself a nice glass of Chardonnay. I just curled up on the couch and I just tore into some envelopes, recorded it with a microphone for some ASMR that I can listen to later. It's just great.
Yeah. No, it was at number 50, but I have to say the best thing about this game, in my opinion, aside from the discovery, whatever, is that card play system, right? Yeah. Is the whole picking two cards, playing them both, top ability of one, bottom of the other, and the fact that you exhaust and stuff. Yeah. I've had a blast playing it, but I stand by my number 50 slot for it.
That's fine. You're wrong, but that's fine.
All right, now on to my number one game of all time, which is the true greatest Uwe Rosenberg game of all time, which is, of course, Agricola. So this is one of the very first games I ever bought. I've logged over 100 plays of this game. It's the game I've spent the most total time playing in my life. Well, actually, maybe up there with Gloomhaven. Yeah. It's hard to say, but either way, this game is pure brilliance. I haven't played it a whole lot in the past few years. During the pandemic, I went back and revisited it solo just to kind of see. And like even after not playing it for I think 2-3 years, I still remembered all of the rules. I didn't have to check the rulebook once. There's a few brilliant things about this game that make it still hold up and that made me play it so many times and love it every time. The first thing I'll say is the cards that you get at the start of the game. It's best to do the drafting, but even if you just deal them out regularly, you have those 7 occupations and 7 minor improvements, and you have to come up with a plan. You know you're not going to be able to play all 14 cards. You might be lucky if you get to play maybe 9 or 10 or whatever, but you have to figure out which ones are you going to play, what's your strategy going to be, and then along the line, like throughout the game, you're never actually going to end up playing all the ones you want. So it's about also cutting your losses, because the game is about getting in other people's ways, taking actions that slow down your opponents, that set them back, that prevent them from doing that crucial action that's going to let them feed their family or build that extra room or get that family member before the harvest. And because you keep going off course to stop them, your own plan goes off course. So then when do you start looking at cards and be like, okay, I'm not going to be able to play that one anymore. I'm not going to be able to play that. And if part of your big strategy was getting towards that end game condition where you get a bunch of points for every, stone room in your house or whatever, and you have to say goodbye to that, well, then where are you getting points? And the game punishes you, gives you -1 for any category where you have like 0 of. So any animal you don't have any of, you get minus a point. If you don't have a fruit, any vegetables or any grains or whatever. And I've seen people criticize that aspect of the game, but I could go back to my game sheets and look at games that I've won, that other people have won, where we had -1 in tons of categories. But if you specialize well enough in 1 or 2 categories, you can win. But you can also win by diversifying. It's brilliant, and the other thing is, across all player counts, I've never seen a game scale this well, in the sense that not only does it play very well at all player counts, but it's very different. The way the game feels, the competition for the spots, because there's different spots that are available depending on player count. Different resources are in higher or in lower demand. There's different occupations that get introduced to the deck, and minor improvements based on the player count. So you can play the same player count over and over. You're going to get different cards. The game's going to play out differently. But then just changing the player count is going to make it feel like a completely fresh game. It's one that I really have to make a point to introduce people to the hobby, or like introduce to my friends who are in the hobby who weren't playing this with me when I first discovered it years and years ago, because it just doesn't get played these days. But every time I thought about it, every time I went back and was doing this Pub Meeple ranking, there was no game I could put above Agricola, just based on how good of a game it is and how fond my memories are of sometimes playing that 2 or 3 times in a row with a group of people in one night. Yeah. We have to play it again, because I know you've only played it, I think, twice, and it's always been like years apart.
Mm-hmm. It's I'm not going to say a whole lot here, because I feel like I don't want to criticize it any more than I already have. And most I'm just criticizing it because I think Feast for Odin's better. But I have enjoyed it both times I've played it. I just, again, because I'm late to the party on this and you've played it so much, I always feel at a disadvantage, which I think is hampering my enjoyment of it a little bit. But I will say, I feel like this is like, we used to be wrestling fans. I feel like this is like, you know how like they would tease all the WrestleMania matchups when you get to the Royal Rumble? Right. That's when things would really start ramping up. I feel like this is the Royal Rumble time right now, where we're teasing the Agricola and Feast for Odin.
Yes, this is the press conference with the trash talk.
One got first of all time, one got second of all time, and this is all leading up to the big WrestleMania head-to-head in January sometime, when we fully tackle this topic, and we'll get you guys to vote in the comments on Team Feast for Odin, Team Agricola, and we'll see what everyone thinks. But yeah, I'm not surprised. I knew it was in your top 2. I didn't know if it was going to be number 1, but not surprised at all. I knew your love for this game right from the start. So
cool.
Yeah. Great choice. This has been an absolute joy for us to do. I hope it's been an absolute blast for you guys to watch. I just want to say thank you so much for this amazing, in terms of our YouTube content and the fun we've had with it, an amazing year. Obviously, there's been challenges for a lot of people. Obviously, it has not been an amazing year for everybody. But in terms of this being something that we could, do to take our mind off of things going on in the world, and also just like invest our time into something we're passionate about and have fun with and interact with all of you guys, cannot say thank you enough. I hope you enjoyed this series. I know that we both enjoyed producing it.
Absolutely.
I know you wanted to talk about quickly some of the guesses
you
had.
I wanted to mention that it was interesting to me looking over our picks or thinking about it. Of my top 10, literally 5 of the games, okay? So Battle Line, Carcassonne, Modern Art, Race for the Galaxy, and Agricola, all in my top 4. One of them was number 6. None of them even cracked your top 50.
Right.
And you had 3 or 4 games. Marvel Champions, Castles of Burgundy,
Seven Wonders
Duel didn't even crack my top 50. Yeah. And again, we do more than 50% of our gaming with each other, and yet some of our absolute favorite games of all time, some of these we've played a lot with each other, didn't even crack the top 50.
Yeah.
Kind of surprised me, because when I started making this list, or before we did, I thought we were going to have way more overlap, and I worried that it might not be as interesting for viewers if every time a game comes up, oh, that was on your list too. And I was pleasantly surprised to see how much of a difference there was. Yeah. I also wanted to mention, I don't know if you looked through your games to see, or your list to see which designers came up the most often. I imagine we both have Knizia and Rosenberg as the top 2. I think I had 7 Rosenberg games, 6 Knizia, and then the next highest of any designer was 2.
Oh, wow.
It just shows how much I personally at least gravitate towards those, and I think you're pretty close on those.
Yeah, I don't have the actual tallies, but I want to look back now. But I think for sure Knizia and Rosenberg are the ones that come up the most. Yeah. And then obviously you had, your top 3 designers are Tom Lehman, Uwe Rosenberg, and Knizia, Rosenberg, and Lehman. I was for some reason I thought Modern Art wasn't there. Yeah, for sure. So I just think that's indicative too of the fact that we do love those designers. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you so much again. This has been, like I said, an absolute blast. Let us know in the comments which of our top 50 list or which of our top 10 you resonate most with. We won't be offended. Whose picks do you think you align more with, or are you surprised by any of the picks? Are you surprised of any of the omissions. Maybe there's a game you don't realize we haven't played. Let us know in the comments. Like I said, this is the last video of 2021. Have a happy holidays. We hope you had a great Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever it is that you celebrate. Happy holidays in general, a great vacation, and we'll see you in the new year for hopefully what is going to be an exciting and amazing 2022 for all of us.
Yeah, and let us know in the comments below what your top 10 of all time is. We're curious to hear yours.
Awesome. Thanks so much for watching, everyone.
Thanks.
See you next time.
See ya.